Welcome back to Fast Market here on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, joined by my co-host Nathan Peterson. But now let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment, and that's going to be Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio. Welcome back to the show, Andy.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, great stock to talk about here today. Netflix going into earnings after the close. I mentioned before the break the stock's up nearly 100% from those lows that we saw just about 8-9 months ago in May. And this, if you look at it over a 2-year period, it traded above 700. It's gone down, the fallout from the pandemic, competition heating up in here. But, this is the first to market as far as streaming goes. They're the best in the business, according to a lot of people. Do you have data that shows that, hey, now that they're doing the ad-tiered segment of their streaming business, is that actually hurting them, helping them? Are people leaving Netflix? What kind of data do you have?
Yeah, it's difficult to tell, exactly how well the ad-based product is doing in terms of converting people over to paying members, or how well they're monetizing that. I think that's really something that we'll be very interested in hearing from management on. But from a competitive standpoint, we're really seeing Netflix kind of buck the trend of the streaming industry. When we look at Netflix versus peers, especially when we're talking about a number of people talking about getting a new subscription to Netflix, or even viewership. In either case, in both cases, Netflix doing a phenomenal job versus peers, hanging on in positive territory while everybody else is down. This is something we really wanted to see out of Netflix, because like you brought up, this is a company that has attracted a lot of very competent competition. And the streaming space is growing at a little bit slower pace. So seeing Netflix be able to continue to dominate this competent level of competition is a very good signal. We do think the ad-based, kind of free level of Netflix, the introductory level, is doing well at attracting consumers. The big question will be, how well are they able to monetize those ads, and how many of those people can they get up to paid tiers? It may be a little early to tell on this conference call, but we think there's good reason for Netflix executives to be fairly confident from here and have a good tone in the call.
Hey, Andy, thanks for joining the show. This is Nathan here. On one of the charts you sent over, I was looking at, the recent uptick in cancellations, and, I can't help but correlate the timing of that uptick with the release of Wednesday, which was around Thanksgiving. A great show, by the way. I enjoyed it, and I know it's a global hit. But then you start to see this pretty significant uptick in cancellations. And I'm thinking, just in terms of the behavior of the streaming consumer since the pandemic, is it likely that, their life cycle has shifted a lot, such that, when you get a new hit like Wednesday that comes out, you go ahead and you get Netflix for a month, and then you just cancel it and wait for Wednesday 2 to come out? I mean, is your data suggesting that's going on with the streaming consumer?
Yeah, there is definitely some of that. I think, a lot of that uptick in mentions was also just somewhat, I don't know if you call it politically driven. The Harry and Meghan documentary got pretty polarizing there for a little while. There was another one on a show called Warrior Nun, where some very specific groups of people got very, very angry. So I think I'd take that with a little bit of a grain of salt in terms of Netflix cancellations. We think churn will probably be in the normal range, maybe a little elevated. The other thing that happens nearly every year, pretty much every year, is that as New Year's Eve comes along and New Year's Day, one thing people do is sit down. One of their resolutions is to get rid of subscriptions they're not using. And so there's a natural churn at the beginning of the year that occurs. I think investors are pretty much prepared for that. The company should be. So we think churn's going to be light. It'll be very interesting to hear how many of those people that quit, though, end up actually engaging with the ad-based platform and staying in the ecosystem, which I think is going to be a big deal for Netflix as we move forward.
Yeah, and that was kind of my question here, Andy. It seems like they're cannibalizing maybe their existing subscribers at this point with this ad-based tier. Now, their ads, they charge double or triple that what the other streamers are, so maybe the profit margins will be there on that side. But if you see the maybe saturation in a lot of viewership and subscribers in Netflix, and I know their international growth is supposed to be their driver moving forward. Those cancellations on ad tier levels and maybe inflationary pressures, does that provide maybe more downside risks to this company, and do you have an earnings score on it?
Yeah, I think it does. I think you bring up good points. Our earnings score on Netflix overall, because of its, what we're seeing as its success in holding its head above water in a little bit of a headwind period versus peers, our earnings score is slightly bullish. I have to say I'm a little more bullish today on Thursday than I was on Monday because the prices come down a little bit. So we think that there's room for a little bit of an upside surprise. I'd be surprised, though, if Netflix gets the kind of move in either direction that Wall Street is expecting that the options are pricing in at this point. I think this is going to be kind of a by-the-book earnings report, and a lot of questions will still need to be answered going forward because they're experimenting very much with a new business model.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see on those numbers, but great data as always. Andy, and I did an informal professional poll here on Twitter, and it's about split 50-50 between higher or low in Netflix shares going into this report, but definitely implied volatility elevated. All right, thanks to Andy. Appreciate it.
All right, have a good one.
All right, that's Andy Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio, breaking down the data here on Netflix.